Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Original Medicine Podcast. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about how coffee is killing you. That daily brew is not a helpful thing for your health. And I want to get into why. Chinese medicine gives us an amazing amount of information that we don't get from other sources. We don't get from modern medicine. It sees things completely differently. And this is why people who have been told that whatever they have going on can't be healed or can't be helped find benefit and find healing in Chinese medicine. So I think it's worthwhile to have this conversation. I see it makes such a tremendous difference in my patients' health when they choose to give up coffee on a daily basis. And I know it's a big ask for so many people. I myself was a huge coffee drinker at the point that I had really insane migraines. And my teacher, Ann Cecil Sturman, said, "You've got to quit the coffee. You have to start eating meat." I was also a vegan at the time. And these two things I think were really critical to transforming my health. And I don't still to this day drink coffee. Sometimes I do consider whether it might be nice to have some coffee occasionally. So we'll get into those details as well. But as a daily drink, I don't think it's doing us any good, and it actually may be killing you. So let's get into why that is. Coffee is obviously bitter, and bitter drains. And when we drain from the most yin organ, which is the heart, we are draining valuable resources. So bitter is also the flavor associated with the heart. And bitter flavors are used in a strategic way in herbal medicine in order that we would not have a cloying effect, that we would also not create stagnation when we are doing things like building. If you have an acupuncturist or if you've been in the Chinese medicine space, you've probably heard this word, this term called blood or blood deficiency or building blood. Blood refers to, yes, the same thing that we think about in allopathic medicine for sure, but it also has an energetic component that's really important in Chinese medicine. But what goes much deeper is all the fluids that are associated with yin. So in modern acupuncture, which is what all acupuncturists learn in school, or TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, they talk about blood deficiency and they talk about building blood, but they don't talk about the other components that go into supporting that blood production, which are also thick fluids, which means fats in the diet. It also refers to thin fluids, which is literally just fluid, like drinking enough water. So when you are doing something like drinking coffee on a daily basis that's bitter, you're draining. And this is draining in a way that cannot be replenished simply from drinking an extra cup of water, because it's draining this energetic property, which are both thin fluids. It can be draining to thick fluids as it just dries and consumes other fluids. And then eventually that has a negative effect on blood. So extremely, extremely depleting. Secondarily, beans also drain. So if we look at a coffee bean, granted, when it is being grown, it's referred to a cherry on the plant, but then it's dried and then roasted. And at that point, it has the texture and the shape of a bean. And these things are important in Chinese medicine because it is an energetic practice. And so the shapes, the colors, the flavors all have an effect on what that food is going to do. Whereas in modern clinical nutrition, we're not taking into consideration any of those things. We're simply measuring clinical components like macros or maybe vitamins or minerals, calories, right? It's just two different things, right? So a lot of modern information says that coffee can help with XYZ, whereas in Chinese medicine, we're looking at it through the lens of all those energetics and also what we call the law of signatures. So again, it's descriptors like, is it, what color is it? What shape is it? And then how does it behave in the body based on its flavors? And so a bitter flavor, as I mentioned before, is going to drain, but then also beans are going to drain. And then on top of that, the bean has been roasted at very high temperatures. And anytime we roast something, we make it more dry. And this can be seen in really simple, easy to understand answers or examples, like when we bake a cake, it goes into the oven as a liquidy substance, but then when it comes out, it's gotten firm from the baking process. Applying heat to the liquid changes the form and the structure, which is what we want to have happen. But when we do that excessively in our diets, even, that can be very drying. This is not to say that we should never roast food. Absolutely not. It's also not to say that we should never drink coffee. But what I'm talking about is on a daily basis, people are starting their day with at least 1 cup of coffee. Many cases or many times people are drinking coffee throughout the day. And this just is reiterating this message of draining, draining, draining. And as we look across the population, we see really high numbers of chronic disease. We see things that aren't even fully diagnosed, but they're just problems that people have. They think they can't get rid of it. Their doctors have told them they can't get rid of it. There's nothing we can do for you. There's no treatment for this. And what I find in my practice is that when people who are working with me also take coffee out of their diets, major things change. And I've heard this even from people who are not working with me. When they take coffee out of their diets, they say, oh my gosh, I thought I had anxiety. Instead, all it was coffee. Or I thought I had a sleep problem and now I don't. I was tired all the time, but now that I don't drink coffee, I have more energy. So let's get into why that is. Very closely related to the draining factor. As I mentioned before, this is coffee from the perspective of classical Chinese medicine and not coffee looking at it through the lens of clinical nutrition research. So the two things are going to be different. But again, if you are a person who has some odd health problem, whether that be physical or mental, and you're not sure what to do about it, you may want to look at the fact that if you are drinking coffee on a daily basis, consider taking that out of the diet. And at the end of this episode, we'll get to what I recommend for people who are looking to cut out coffee and not wanting to just cold turkey it, which is what I did, and it was terrible. When you're fatigued all the time, but you're drinking coffee, why is this? Coffee, being the bitter substance that it is going to drain resources, okay? This is also going to be very draining and depleting for the kidneys. So the heart is the organ that is associated with bitter flavors, and the heart communicates with the kidney. And when the heart can no longer do that because it's weakened by something that we're doing on a regular basis, like drinking coffee, this can over time weaken the kidneys. And the kidneys do provide energy for daily living, for reproduction, for menstrual cycles, for growth, maturation. Kidneys affect everything, okay? So we don't want to be messing around with our kidneys, and that's exactly what we're doing when we're drinking coffee on a regular basis. So people say, oh, I'm so tired. I just don't know why I'm so tired. And then when I suggest maybe we should cut out that cup of coffee, no, I'm not going to even consider that. Okay, well then accept that you will be tired, okay? I'm giving you the answer and you refuse to believe me. I don't know what else to do for you. So that's why I'm here talking about this today. There are all kinds of things that people suffer with and struggle with on an ongoing basis, and they don't realize how significant one single small thing that they do every day can be affecting this. And it's because it's draining from the kidneys. It's draining the resources, like I mentioned before. Thick fluids, thin fluids, and then blood. These are really important resources for having good health in Chinese medicine. Like I mentioned before, when we're draining and we're becoming depleted in these resources, those are the resources that are used in the body to hold what we call pathology in latency. And when we don't have enough of those fluids anymore, we can't hold the problem in latency. So that's when we get all the symptoms. You get joint pain, you get your autoimmune diagnoses. And the far end of the spectrum is you find yourself with a cancer diagnosis. And again, I've talked to several people who have had multiple cancer diagnoses and they refuse to give up the coffee. They will continue drinking coffee until the day they die. Obviously, that is their choice, but they refuse to see the connection between something that they have been doing on a daily basis, probably their entire lives, like more than 50 years, and the relationship to their cancer diagnosis, multi-cancer diagnoses. Okay, so it's very clear in Chinese medicine that when we do things that deplete our mediumship, our resources, those two words are interchangeable. So when you hear me say resources, I'm talking about mediumship. If you hear me say mediumship, I'm talking about resources. We want to do everything we can to support our resources, to rebuild them, and minimize the things that drain, okay? So if we're going to have a cup of coffee occasionally with a friend, with our family, with dessert, that is not a crisis. We're not getting all worried about that in most cases, okay? But if we're doing it every day, that's sending a really strong message to the body that we need to drain, and drain a lot, and drain consistently. That is not a good idea for literally anyone's health. Now, of course, are there people who can do this better than others and withstand it? Of course. Are there people who could bang their head against a wall every day and withstand it better than others? Of course. Does that mean it's recommended? No, these are two different things, right? So do we want to get through life or do we want to really thrive in life? This is the question that I'm really asking and sort of like putting out there. If you could be healthier, if you could be more energetic, would you go through the process to make a change to do so? And I think taking coffee out of the daily diet is a really great way to have more energy, to feel more vibrant, and to have better long-term health because it is going to preserve the mediumship that we need to stay healthy from a Chinese medicine perspective, of course. Okay, the last thing that I wanted to talk about is coffee versus tea and alternatives to coffee. So there are two factors at play when in coffee being depleting. The first I already mentioned, because of the energetics of coffee, it's very, very draining and drying, which depletes us from mediumship. Okay, we've gotten that part. The other component is for sure caffeine. Caffeine raises our yang energy, and coffee tends to have more caffeine per serving than other forms of caffeine. And also people tend to just drink much more coffee than other forms of caffeine as well. And so caffeine does raise the yang energy, Y-A-N-G. This is the opposite of yin. And this is basically the fire of getting things done, movement, being active. But yin is the firewood. And every time you raise the yang energy, you are depending to some degree on the yin. And when we do this over and over and over, in addition, in the case of coffee, it's the bitter flavors and the other energetics that make it a draining substance. This is really depleting on the yin. So we have less and less yin to rely on. Meanwhile, we're raising the yang. It's just not a good idea. So if we switch to decaf coffee, is that helpful? I do think, yes, that is helpful, but I don't think it's quite as helpful as people imagine it to be because all the energetics are still there. This is an energetic medicine. We're looking at things energetically, and we're talking about things that are different from modern clinical nutritional perspectives. So I do think reducing to half calf or to decaf is a step in the right direction. And if you do want to get off coffee as a daily habit, I think that's an absolutely great way to go about doing it. Pour yourself a smaller cup of full caffeinated coffee or make a half calf coffee for yourself so that you're reducing the caffeine reliance as you reduce the energetic. The other thing that I more commonly recommend is to switch to black tea. Black tea still has plenty of caffeine in it. Sometimes, depending on how it's brewed, it can be even more caffeinated than a plain cup of coffee, but it doesn't have the same energetics. And let's talk about that briefly as well. Tea leaves are sometimes roasted, but I think this is less common. From the research that I've done looking at how teas are made, very different process. Usually teas are dried and then you put them under boiling water, right? They do have a dehydrating effect. They do have a little bit of a draining effect for sure. And you can see this when you have a cup of coffee or when you have a cup of tea, people have to pee, right? This is normal because it's draining. But the energetic is a lot less significant in tea. And if this were not true, people wouldn't be so resistant to giving up their coffee. Coffee is an addictive substance and people love it. They get in the habit of doing it physically as well as mentally. There are a lot of layers to this, right? But if you understand how damaging it is to your health long term, you may be thinking to yourself, you know what? I do want to consider not doing coffee on a daily basis. I want to have it on special occasions, maybe just once on the weekend or, whatever the case may be. But on a daily basis, I want to switch. So what can I do? This is why I want to talk about this. So for sure, like I mentioned, reducing from full calf to half calf, doing smaller cups of coffee, or just switching straight to tea because tea is not going to be as draining, but it is going to give you the caffeine boost that will help ease the transition. And then of course, like green tea as well, like has a significant amount of caffeine in it. Many people think of green tea as being an herbal tea. I've even worked in coffee shops. As I mentioned, I love coffee myself. And people that I worked with would tell people that green tea was herbal tea. I do not find it to be so. Statistically speaking, just like factually speaking, it does have caffeine, but it is much lower than coffee. So that may be something that is a good transition for you. It doesn't, again, have quite as much caffeine, so we're not getting as big of a yang response, which drains the yin. And then we're also not getting all of the draining, drying energetics of coffee when we have tea. So green tea, an excellent choice, even black tea, a good choice. We always want to keep an eye on the amount of caffeine that we're consuming, whether through food or beverages, simply because of what I mentioned before. It is raising the yang energy, and we want to be cautious with that. This is also true of high intensity workouts, but that's a different topic for another episode. But we want to keep energy balanced and in the middle ground. We don't want to have like high spikes, whether that's from sugar, from caffeine, from high intensity exercise. We want to balance the way we're using our energy. So if you think about it through like a financial analogy, we don't want to just blow through all of our money. Then we're left with nothing, and we've got to figure out how to rebuild. And we all know that from a financial perspective, it is like a better financial strategy to not do that, right? We don't want to spend everything we have. We want to have a savings account. We want to have an investment account where we're growing that money so that we have enough for the long term. And the same thing is true from an energetic perspective. When we look at the body through Chinese medicine, we're thinking about what are the resources that we have here? What are we going to need of those resources to live our daily lives? Maybe we go through stressful times, and so we're spending more energy, we're spending more of those resources in that period of time, but then we can slow down, things start to recover, and we can also, again, that's sort of like an investment account. Like we're pulling from the investment, but then we need to slow back down and replenish those resources that we have lost due to that stress, due to just daily living, right? This is normal. We have to spend money in daily life. We have to spend resources in daily life. But if we live in a way that is really supportive of those resources, then we can live a long, healthy life. It's much more likely, we should say, that we have a long, healthy life where we feel like we have plenty of energy, we feel well, and we enjoy the time that we have on this planet. So today, to recap, we talked about why coffee is really not doing you any favors. I genuinely think that it's leading to poor health in pretty much everyone, but especially if you already have a chronic condition, if you have any kind of symptom, if you have any kind of mental health concern, I would definitely encourage you to keep coffee to something that is occasional or for a special occasion every now and then, but as a daily beverage, I would not recommend that really for anyone. If you're doing it and you feel okay, just take this information like under consideration. I'm glad for you. I never would wish you harm, of course, but just know that it's something that's risky. It's kind of like stepping out into traffic and not looking before you do so, but saying, well, this time I was okay. You were, but let's don't do that again. Let's not repeat it. That's kind of how I think about coffee. It's just a big risk to do it on a daily basis. And I think that people's resistance in drinking coffee also tells me, and I think it should also tell them, it should be a sign that there's something to it. Like, why do we need this oomph? Why do we need something that has so much detriment, like potential detriment, but we're going to still do it on a daily basis? And then people say to me, like, it's a ritual. It's my quiet time in the morning. You can make a ritual out of literally anything. You can have a cup of hot water, which is also what I recommend first thing in the morning. So myself personally, I'm a tea drinker. I do drink tea every morning, but I drink a cup of hot water first. This is to replenish fluids lost at night. It's to get the bowels moving, to tell the body, hey, we're going to hydrate you. It's a really great tool. So try that as well. First thing, warm water in the morning. Get rid of the coffee, switch to tea, or maybe the concession is half calf as you're going to tea and away from coffee on a regular basis. But let me know, connect with me on Instagram. What do you think about this? Do you have questions? Are there things that you've tried? I really have heard so many great stories, especially patients that as they're working with me, they agree to cut out coffee altogether or reduce at least by half, and they make tremendous strides in their health. And then something comes up and they go back to coffee and they come in and they say, oh my gosh, I felt absolutely horrible this week. And guess what I did? They are linking it to the coffee. They're seeing how it is so depleting because, again, as long as those resources are good, you're going to feel well. And coffee is something that really depletes the resources. So if we're looking to support resources and rebuild resources, coffee is not your friend. And that's really the whole summary of this entire episode. Please give me a like or a share or a rating, something that helps me get this message out to more people, because especially like you heard in this episode, this is such a tiny thing that people are doing every day and all across the world. Coffee is like this shared bonding experience. It's how people spend time together. And I really appreciate the social aspect, but I think it is really detrimental to health, as I have seen in my own experience cutting out coffee. And like I said, with patients as well, it makes a tremendous difference. So I hope you'll give it a try, and I hope you'll share this episode if you found it helpful. Thank you, and I'll see you next week.